Good day, geographers, and welcome to this lesson about weathering and erosion. Our coastline is changing every single day, so it will never be exactly the same as the last time you visited, which is quite exciting. Although most of these changes are so small, you probably won't even notice. For today's lesson, all you need is a pen, a ruler, and paper. In a second, I'm going to ask you to pause and take a moment to get those and to clear all the distractions away. Alternatively, you might choose to go and work in a quieter place where you won't be disturbed this lesson. Right, pause now and I'll see you back in a second. Now you're ready, can you just make sure, please, that you write down the title, Coastal Weathering and Erosion, on the top of your piece of paper. Underline it beautifully for me, and then we're ready to go. Our beautiful coastline varies from place to place. Have a look at these images now and consider how they're different. Think about what your nearest coastline looks like. In some places, like the photo on the left, the dominant process affecting the coastline is deposition, and we have some beautiful beaches. However, in other places, our coastline mainly experiences erosion and weathering, as is the case in the photo on the right, which shows old Harry rocks on the Dorset coastline. Today, we're going to look at these processes in more depth. We're going to start with coastal erosion. So what is erosion? Erosion is the wearing away and removal of material by a moving force, for example, a wave. There are three main types of erosion that we're going to consider today. Let's look at what's going on at the base of this cliff. Firstly, there are cracks in the cliff, and as the waves batter the coastline, water is forced into these cracks, compressing the air trapped within. As the wave retreats, the air rushes out, and this force, alongside the force of the water, may cause bits of rock to chip off, which widens the cracks. We call this hydraulic action. I remember thinking that this is a bit like a balloon. You can only blow into the balloon so many times before the pressure is going to be too much and it explodes. Next, waves carry sediment within them. They throw this sediment at the cliff. This sediment scrapes away at the cliff, eroding it. It works a bit like sandpaper. As you scrape the sandpaper against a block of wood, you see fine bits of sawdust come off, and it's the same with a cliff. My boys are always falling over in the playground and coming home with grazes on their knee, where the top layer of skin has been scraped away by the tarmac. An old-fashioned word for a graze is an abrasion. You can hear the pain in that word as you fall over and scrape off that skin. Abrasion. It's the same. Sediment in that wave is scraping off the cliff. Abrasion. The final erosion process we're going to look at is attrition. Other loose sediment in the water is swirled around by the wave. As it bashes against other particles, bits are going to break off. It's this process that eventually smooths all the pebbles in the water. I remember this word by thinking of the noise the pebbles will make as they knock together. At-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat, attrition. It sounds like the start of that word, and you've got those two T's in the word too. At-tat-tat-tat-tat, attrition. Let's have a look at the words written down. So, water being forced into the cracks is hydraulic action. You might also see this as hydraulic power. Waves throwing the sediment that scrape away at the cliff is abrasion. And finally, two rocks that bash together is attrition. At-tat-tat-tat-tat, attrition. Just a way to help you remember these, there are three types of erosion. And if we look at the first letter of each of these words, we have H, A. So you can remember these three types of erosion by remembering HA. Okay? Erosion is not so funny, admittedly, but we can remember it using the acronym HA. Let's just have a quick look at these processes in action to see what they look like. If we think first of all about attrition, it's two rocks bashing together. So here are my pebbles. As they're in the water, they knock against each other and their sides become more rounded. Abrasion is when material in the water acts like sandpaper and scrapes against the cliff causing bits to wear off. And hydraulic action, where the sheer force of the water, that pressure, causes it to explode. Right, it's your turn. Which erosion process involves the wearing away of cliffs by sediment flung by the waves? 5 seconds. Tell me now. Yes, it is abrasion. So as the waves are flinging that sediment, they're scraping away at the cliff face. Abrasion. Which erosion process is where rocks being transported by waves bump into each other, becoming smaller? Make sure you're telling me out loud so I can check. Well done. The word is attrition. Tat, 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 tat. Those rocks bash together. It's your turn now for a task. On the screen, we've got 4 definitions. We've got a definition for abrasion, attrition, erosion, and hydraulic action. So I would like you to pause the video now, and I would like you on your piece of paper to write down the key word followed by its definition. Make sure you press play when you're finished. Let's see how you got on. The first definition was breaking waves compress pockets of air into cracks in a cliff. The pressure may eventually cause the crack to widen, breaking off rock. That one is hydraulic action. When rocks transported by waves bump into each other and break up into smaller pieces, it is attrition. The wearing away and removal of material by a moving force, for example, a wave, is erosion. So that's the umbrella term. And the final one is the wearing away of cliffs by sediment flung by breaking waves. And that one is abrasion. It's where those particles scrape away at the cliff. How many did you get? Next, we're going to move on and we're going to have a look at coastal weathering. So coastal weathering is different from erosion because weathering is the wearing away of rocks in situ. In situ means where it is. It will be a good idea to pause the video and just jot down this definition now. It's different to erosion because with erosion, the material is worn away and then transported away. There are 2 types of weathering. In the photo on the top right, we can see chemical weathering. Then the second type of weathering is mechanical, and we're going to look in more depth about freeze-thaw weathering in particular. Chemical weathering is the breaking down of rock caused by a chemical change within that rock. On the coast, salt water will weather the cliffs through the process of carbonation. It's common on limestone and chalk cliffs. So that salt water, which is slightly acidic, creates a chemical change within that rock. It will be a good idea now to pause and just get down the top sentence. Mechanical weathering is our second type. This involves the breaking up of rock without changing its chemical composition. Just pause a second and write that down for me on your piece of paper. We're going to look at one example of mechanical weathering, and that is freeze-thaw weathering. If we look at these diagrams, we would have water entering the cracks in the rock. So as it rains, the water goes into the cracks. Overnight, when it's colder, this water can freeze, and as it freezes, it can expand, and that expansion will create pressure on that crack, creating a wider crack. In the morning, when it becomes warmer, the ice melts, and so the water can now go deeper into the crack that's been widened. This process will repeat and repeat and repeat until eventually bits of rock will splinter off. So this is an example of freeze-thaw weathering. And if we look at that term, freeze, so the water freezes to start with, and then it thaws. And thaw is another word for melt. So it's quite explanatory, self-explanatory. Right, it's time to test your memory. How many types of weathering are there? 3, 2, 1. Show me with your fingers. Yes, well done. There are 2. Be careful not to fall into the trap of saying 3, because freeze-thaw weathering is actually an example of mechanical weathering. So can you now tell me how many types of coastal erosion are there? Let's have a countdown. 3, 2, 1. Have you got your number of fingers up? Yes, well done. There are 3 types of coastal erosion. We remember them using the acronym HAA. H-A-A. Say them out loud for me now. H, hydraulic action. A, abrasion. A, attrition. Well done. Our next question, we need to think a little bit harder about. So which 2 of these statements are true about weathering? I'm going to give you 30 seconds to read through these really carefully. While you're doing it, jot down 2 letters. Which 2 statements are true? Right, let's see how you got on. Did you get A? Chemical weathering includes a chemical change in the rock. And did you get D? Freeze-thaw weathering is a type of mechanical weathering. So if we have a look at B, freeze-thaw occurs when waves trap air in a crack. That's not freeze-thaw, that's actually a type of erosion. Can you tell me out loud now, what is it when waves trap air in a crack? Yes, hydraulic action. And C, chemical weathering is common on softer rocks like limestone. So that was the mistake there. Time for a bigger task now. I would like you to do it just from this screen. I would like you to use your pencil and your ruler to draw out this diagram. I'd like you to identify the 2 weathering processes and an example. I would like you to write down the 3 erosional processes. So ideally, you would pause now. If you want some more support, if you leave it a couple of seconds, the words for you to choose from will come up on the screen. Good luck, everyone. I'll see you soon. Welcome back. Let's see how you got on. Let's have a quick check. Did you get the weathering? Chemical weathering and mechanical weathering, and our example was freeze-thaw. The erosion processes, remember it's HA, hydraulic action, abrasion, and attrition. Well done. Your diagrams, by the way, are looking very neat. Now it's time for the big task today. You've learnt about erosion and weathering, and I would like you finally to summarise all this excellent learning by describing the process of freeze-thaw weathering. To do that, when we describe a process, it's important we get it in the correct order. So, use sequencing words in your writing, please. First of all, next, over time, eventually. And I would like you to try and include 4 steps in your writing. So pause the video now, resume once you're finished. I look forward to seeing what you've done. Right, let's have a look at this piece of work. How did you get on? We had to describe the process of freeze-thaw weathering. I asked you to think about sequence, so I'd like you to highlight in your writing the connectives that show sequence. First of all, water enters the cracks in rock. Give yourself a big tick, that's 1 mark. Next, water freezes and expands, widening the cracks. So I really want you to have that concept of expansion in there. 1 mark. Then Ice melts and water goes deeper into the crack, so we need that concept of thawing the next day. Over time, this process repeats, causing bits of rock to splinter off. So some kind of concept in your writing that this happens over and over again. Well done. That brings us to the end of today's lesson. We've learnt about 2 types of weathering and 3 types of erosion. But if we think about the mechanics of how we learn, we want to make sure this important information does not erode from our memory. Select and highlight now 3 things you think might weather away over time, and make a conscious effort to have a quick minute's glance over your notes again tomorrow. We can do this. Finally, one last task before you disappear. I need you to click on the next page and complete your quiz to show me how much you've learned. I cannot wait to see how you've got on. Thanks for all your time today. Take care, and I look forward for you joining me with mass movements soon. See you later.